In other appointment news, we have President Trump planning to nominate economists Judy Shelton and also Christopher Waller to fill two board vacancies at the Federal Reserve. Two names that at least one that could be a little bit controversial here going forward. What has been the general reaction to this nomination so far?
Yeah, well, those inside the Washington Beltway are starting to opine on these two nominations. As you mentioned, Judy Shelton, she was the former economic advisor for the Trump transition team, currently serving as a director at the European Bank for Development. The St. Louis Fed's Christopher Waller is the other candidate. It's interesting because Isaac Boltanski, the head of the Compass Point Research and Trading Group down in Washington, D.C., actually just sent out an email note saying that he expects Shelton's path to confirmation to be slightly narrower than Christopher Waller's. That's because of the fact that she was the Trump transition advisor, so she does appear to have some ties to the president. This all coming especially as we've heard the president criticize the Fed, so the optics of it appear to be the case that maybe this is an effort, perhaps, to influence Fed policy. But on the other hand, Christopher Waller, again, he's been at the St. Louis Fed since 2009. He's a career economist who has appeared to stay outside of the D.C. Beltway, so doesn't appear to have too many direct ties to anything that has to do with this administration, so kind of a plain Jane vanilla candidate, if you will. So it'll be interesting to see if these two candidates are taken up in tandem. Again, President Trump tweeted yesterday that it's its intention to nominate these two individuals, but no White House paperwork has officially been filed yet. And keep in mind that we're headed into a Senate that beginning next year will be at the beginning of an election cycle, so unsure about the appetite of Mitch McConnell and the Senate to actually take up these nominations, given that we already have 5 of the 7 Fed board seats already filled.
All right, thanks, Brian. Scott, let me get your reaction on this. We know President Trump has had trouble getting some of his recent Fed picks confirmed in the past. Do you think it'll be different this time around?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, Judy Shelton seems to have preferred the going back on the gold standard, which I'm not sure how popular that idea will be.
She ain't Herman Cain.
Yeah, well, what I think is most striking, though, is the notion of Christine Lagarde becoming the president of the ECB. I think is a very interesting decision. I think she'd be a great candidate. Couple things to say about that. The idea that she doesn't have a central bank background perhaps is fueled by the fact that Powell doesn't have a central bank background, and you could argue that he's had a lot of missteps over the past year. And so the market is worried that, well, if you don't have a central bank background, maybe you're not able to communicate with the market. On the other hand, if you think about the difference between the role of ECB president and the role of Fed chair, I mean, Jerome Powell has to deal with one country. As president of the ECB, you have dozens of countries that you have to maneuver around, and she has the political experience to deal with that. And then finally, on the point that we don't know much about her thoughts on monetary policy, she is asked quite often about what she thinks of what the ECB is doing. And actually, back in April, she said that negative interest rates are a net positive. And we have seen negative interest rates in Europe and Japan. So that could kind of give us a hint about what she might do should she become president of the ECB.
Not only a hint, but it seems to be the message on both sides of the Atlantic with these nominations is everybody, the good times, if you like, inexpensive borrowing are going to continue.
Sure, and it's hard for me to think that Christine Lagarde is a pick that many people could take much issue with. I see what you're saying about people say lack of experience in this one regard, but running the IMF, I mean, it seems to me like she is a person who knows what she's doing. At least, especially in terms of, we're talking about President Trump's picks and certain rumored picks, other names we've heard thrown around recently. It seems night and day in terms of sort of the stature, the weight they carry.
So when Italy is, butting heads with the EU and not adhering to the budget guidelines, is she going to stand up and say, we're fining you or we're not lending to you, and then risk collapse?
Yeah, she has that experience. So she did that with Greece. Remember, when the Greece debt situation happened, the Troika was the European Commission, the ECB, and one other agency that I'm blanking on, but ultimately she knows the ECB, the IMF, and the European Commission. So she knows how to navigate those waters when it comes to one specific country that's facing issues.
But Greece was a much smaller economy. Italy is the 4th largest economy in Europe. That's where they're going to head. It's going to be a showdown between Italy and Christine Lagarde.
No one thinks this will be an easy job.